Thank you, Ellen. That was beautiful, and it's very difficult to follow such an inspiring speech. I have a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old, and hi, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Soretta McDonough. I practice antitrust law at Gibson, Dunn & Crutcher in Los Angeles, and I am your incoming vice president of the National Association of Women Lawyers. I have the honor of introducing the M. Ashley Dickerson Award, which is awarded to a lawyer who has promoted and advanced diversity in the legal profession. It is named after Mahala Ashley Dickerson, a former NAWL president and the first African-American woman lawyer admitted to the bar in Alabama, and also in her adopted home state of Alaska. According to records kept by the Alaska Bar Association, Ashley Dickerson prosecuted one of the first equal pay cases on behalf of women university professors who received less pay than their male counterparts, which is fitting then that we should honor a female university professor today, a woman lawyer who may have benefited from the work of the woman who inspired this award. This year's award goes to Sheri Lynn Johnson, the James and Mark Flanagan Professor of Law and Associate Dean for Public Engagement at Cornell Law School. Professor Johnson graduated magna cum laude from the University of Minnesota and went on to graduate from Yale Law School. She joined Cornell shortly thereafter in 1981 and became its first tenured female law professor. In 1996, she co-founded the Cornell Death Penalty Project, which provides direct representation to clients who are either facing capital charges or have already been sentenced to death, primarily focusing on issues of race and mental illness. As she has for the past 35 years at Cornell, guided and supported its diverse law students, including serving as the faculty advisor to the Black Law Student Association. I do not exaggerate when I say that Professor Johnson has spent both her professional and her personal lives in the pursuit of equality and justice. For over 30 years, she has written widely on race and race relations, illuminating dark corners of our legal system and providing the much-needed evidence of institutional biases that our legal system must confront and overcome. I could end there, but Professor Johnson's commitment is not limited to the countless hours dedicated to ensuring that justice is truly blind to race, gender, and other immutable characteristics. Just as impressive is the sacrifice of her personal time to ensuring that every diverse law student who came within the doors of Cornell Law School had every opportunity to succeed. In preparing my introductory comments today, I spoke to a number of diverse Cornell Law School graduates, actually from each decade during which Professor Johnson taught. So we're talking the 80s, the 90s, the zeros, the tens. I looked that up on the internet, and they said that you could call it the aughts and the noughts, but that seemed a little negative. I wanted to be able to impart, even if it was imperfect, the impact that Professor Johnson has had on the diverse law students who, for over 30 years, have come through Cornell's doors. And I know there are several Cornell graduates here today, and if you could stand in support of Professor Johnson while I finish my introduction, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. When asked to describe Professor Johnson in one word, the graduate spoke of sacrifice, honesty, tough love, and time and again I heard the word genuine, and how she became, for many of them, their law school mom, whom they now call friend and mentor, and who, even many years later, is still always available to provide advice that could never be called sugar-coated. The graduates I spoke with said that they could not imagine a better champion or more impassioned advocate, and that her commitment to diverse students at Cornell was and is unmatched. The key, as with almost everything we find, is that she was there to listen. But more importantly, she has always made sure that diverse students were heard. So please help me welcome and thank Professor Johnson for giving so much of herself to further equality and diversity in our profession.
I found that I really could not speak about diversity today without thinking about the tragic events of the last 2 weeks. I grew up in Minneapolis 30 years before Philando Castile did. My middle-class family was an interracial one, and the experience of my African-American siblings then with the police were very different than my own. So it's particularly sad for me to see how little has changed and so much remains to be done. While I'm very proud to be here today and I look at the list of past awardees, I feel unworthy. It's not only unworthiness, but it's ironic. I've actually received so much more from my students and my clients than I have given. I have had clients who have, despite what they've done, shown me remarkable humanity, and I've had students who've come from amazingly difficult backgrounds become truly great lawyers. So let me speak a little bit first about what I've received, and then maybe a little bit about giving back to all of them. So this will be a surprising transition. Ramiro Hernandez Llanes grew up on a toxic waste dump in Mexico. He ate from the garbage. He lived in a house of cardboard frequented by rodents. He was beaten by both his parents and had such limited intelligence that he was kicked out of school. Despite an IQ in the 60s, and despite a tragic life that the jury knew nothing about, Ramiro was executed by the state of Texas because the state of Texas claimed that he was not intellectually disabled, but rather that his extreme impairments were normal for Mexicans. That is to say, if he were white with the same impairments, he would be alive today. I have represented many clients, but Ramiro's case was the most blatantly lawless and blatantly discriminatory. After his death, I despaired as a lawyer, but I decided to do two things in response. One was to tell his story to as many people as I could, and you're the largest audience I've had so far. and the second was to learn Spanish. Fast forward 2 years to a graduation party I was invited to by one of my students. Several Latino graduates and their families were there and enjoying food, music, and dancing, and Spanish. They insisted that I dance with them. I'm a terrible dancer, but I had to sort of recognize the warmth of the invitation. Each graduate then gave a speech in Spanish, of course, and one of the cousins asked me if I understood. I answered, "Solo entiendo un poco, estudio mucho, pero aprendo despacio," which means I understand a little, I study a lot, but I learn slowly. And I realized when I was thinking of what I would say today that about captures what my experience with my clients and my students have been, and my colleagues, and my siblings, and my friends, and my children, when learning about race. I understand only a little, but I do study a lot, and I learn, albeit slowly. And my students and colleagues of color have been incredibly patient with the speed of my learning, incredibly generous in sharing their lives and experiences. I started to make a list of who I thought I had to thank, and then I realized that if I spent my whole 5 minutes thanking people, I couldn't cover them all, and also I might forget someone. So I'm not going to name them all, but I do have to name Leslie Richards-Yellen, who was the first student to share her experiences with me and who has shared much of her life with me since then. Thank you, Leslie, for everything. And to all of the members of BALSA at Cornell, especially BALSA, and to the wider Black community who have welcomed me as a professor, a friend, and an ally, I thank you for your openness, your patience, your generosity, and also to LALSA and NAWLSA and APALSA and SALSA and Lambda. Thank you to all of you for teaching me, teaching a slow learner. But I also want to say something briefly to those who are themselves in my very white skin and listening, trying to understand, and thinking about what to do with that understanding. Eva Patterson, who is an African-American Berkeley Law graduate and an activist in Oakland, who, by the way, has a wonderful newsletter on race that you can get by email, and you really should do that. But in any event, she recently circulated the story of Peter Norman, the white guy in the picture. Norman was the silver medalist who appears in the famous photograph with the raised fist salute of African-American athletes John Carlos and Tommie Smith at the 1968 Olympics. Though Norman's story isn't well known, Norman joined their protest by wearing an Olympic Project for Human Rights badge on the podium, a quiet rebellion that cost him his entire athletic career in then apartheid Australia. I think that Norman exemplifies not only rebelliousness at great personal cost, but an admirable combination of solidarity and humility. What I love about the story of Norman is that he did not try to grab the reins or the mic or put up his own fist as though he were Black. He did not assume that he could or should do just what Carlos and Smith did. He instead asked them what to do that might help. And he became, as a consequence, lifelong friends with Carlos and Smith. Lawyering is not actually so different from everything else. Being a rebellious white athlete is not so different from being a rebellious white lawyer. I think I learned to do better at lawyering across racial lines, largely by listening to my students and colleagues and friends and family who are people of color. So lawyering as a white person with clients who are people of color and being a white professor with students of color is part of the larger enterprise of being a white person learning from and trying to be in solidarity with people of color in all aspects of life. There is a statue of the 1968 athletes at San Jose State University. And what's very interesting is there's a statue of Carlos and of Smith, and there is no one in the place of Peter Norman. And the reason for that is that Norman asked that his position be left empty so that people who came to the statue would come and put themselves in his shoes. So try to stand in Peter Norman's shoes.